this day. I thank you for the sun that is shining and for bringing each person out. I pray for those who are on their way that you give them safety as they travel. And I just pray that you guide and direct our discussion today as we discuss our hearts and our abilities that you have given us. I thank you for all the different unique gifts that you give us. In Jesus' name, amen. So hopefully you have all filled out the first section of your profile with spiritual gifts. Just something to keep in mind, the goal of this class is to give you the tools that you need to fill this out. In the future, you may want to come back to this a couple years from now, because you might still be saying, I don't know what my spiritual gift is. A year from now, you'll have a better understanding of that gift if you're involved in ministry. Spiritual gifts are discovered as you use them. We talked about through trial and error, you'll discover them. And as you get more involved in ministry, you will have a better understanding of what your gifts are, which is why this class is giving you the tools you need. It's also why I tell people it's not a bad idea to retake this class every couple of years, because the more involved in ministry you get, the better understanding you'll have of the gifts God's given you, and the more sense it'll make. So this week I had you review the gift list, and you could still talk to a couple of Christian friends who've known you since you became a Christian and ask, which of these do you think are evident in my life? Perhaps just a little bit of it's forming. Make sure you complete that spiritual gift section of your profile, because today we're going to add a whole new section to it. And we're going to talk about heart and abilities. But first, we're going to focus on heart. So what is your heart? It's what you love to do. It's your basic motivational patterns. What motivates me? What gets me excited? This is your heart. And how would you define heart? So there are a lot of fill-ins at the first half of this lesson, so I apologize. I did not set it up this way. Someone else did. You can blame Rick Warren. Anyway, your heart is, first, it's the organ that pumps your blood. It's the thing that keeps you alive. Without your heart, you're not going to be able to do much. It gives you your unique heartbeat. It's the emotional constitution. It's your emotional constitution or disposition. In other words, it's your emotional center. You know, you'll hear people say that they have a broken heart, or my heart hurts for them. That's because that is where you have those emotions coming from. And then the third thing is it's the vital force or driving impulse. It's what drives you. It's what gives you passion. You'll say you have a lot of, someone's got a lot of heart, things like that. So those are the three definitions of a heart that help to make the heart that we will talk about today. And so we're going to discuss what's the realm of the heart, which means the areas that the word heart encompasses. As I said, the heart is the center of your motivation, desires, and inclinations. Psalm 37:4 says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." So just a little clarification about this verse. It's one of those verses that people misuse a lot. They'll be like, well, this is what my heart desires, so God's going to give it to me. If you're delighting yourself in the Lord, then the Lord becomes a desire of your heart. So then the Lord gives himself to you, and it just becomes a very nice, ever-growing pattern. But the Bible uses the word heart to represent the center of your motivations, desires, and inclinations. We talk about serving God with all your heart. Love God with all your heart. We give him your heart. You ask Jesus into your heart. Obviously, this is not your physical heart that's beating in your chest, because that would be very difficult and weird. But it is what drives you. So I want you to start thinking about, what is your passion? What are the things that drive you? What are you passionate about? And this is going to impact how you do ministry and what areas of ministry you do ministry in. The heart also determines the conversations of your mouth. Matthew 12:34 says, "For out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks." We speak what is in our hearts without even realizing it a lot of times. When you talk to someone, you're getting to know them, how do you find out what their interests are? It's what they talk about. You know, the more you talk about something, it's usually the more passionate you are about it. You can't really hide your passions. They come through in what you say. You know, if someone likes a certain team, you're going to find that out because they're going to talk about it. If they're really excited about their kids, you're going to find that out if they like what they do for a living, because there's such a passion in there. The heart also controls the concentration of your feelings. Psalm 20 verse 4 said, let me try that again. Psalm 20 verse 4 says, "May he give you the desire of your heart and make all your plans succeed." And then in Hebrews 4:12, it says, "For the word of God is living and active, sharper than any double-edged sword. It judges the thoughts and attitudes of the heart." Motives are based out of your heart. Not obviously the physical organ. Your heartbeat doesn't go music, 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 although some people might feel like that's what it does. But it's the seat of motivations for your desires. So it's the driving force of what you say and do. So the things that come out of your mouth come from your heart, but also the motivation behind why you love them comes out of your heart. The heart also guides your choices and actions. This can either be a good thing or a bad thing. How? You're either going to follow sinful desires or Christian passions. All things that you do are going to fall into these two camps. Either the things you do are going to draw you closer to God or having you drift away from God. James 1:15 says, "Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death." And in Proverbs 4:23, it says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for it is the offspring of life." So Jesus talked about how if you have a faith the size of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. So it just takes a little bit of something to do something big, whether good or bad. As James says, a desire the size of a mustard seed that is bad is going to result in sin, whereas a desire the size of a mustard seed that's for God, you can move mountains with. Next, we're going to talk about the revelation of the heart, or what your heart reveals about you. The cool thing is that God has given you a unique passion to serve him. Physiologically, each of us has a unique heartbeat. Each person's has a slightly different pattern. Some companies even use biometric heartbeats as passwords because no one else can have your same heartbeat. It's the same thing with our spiritual heartbeat. God has given each of us a unique heartbeat in serving him. May he give you the desire of your heart and make your plan succeed, Psalm 24. We instinctively feel deeply about some things and not others. Just as each of us has a different physiological heartbeat, we all love to do different things. We all know that person who's super passionate about something that we find really boring, and they're going on and on, and you're like, how do you like that so much? My sister and I will joke around because she loves art and history, and I obviously am a science person, and the one of us will start talking, and we're like, no, just move on to the next thing. Or I was just out there this past week, and my nephew really loves the Star Wars battle droids right now. So much so that he wanted to show me a 45-minute YouTube video about why the Star Wars battle droids are the most abused characters in Star Wars. And I was like, yeah, we're not doing that. And he's like, no, but you gotta watch it. I'm like, yeah, that's not happening. I'm not wasting 45 minutes of my life watching that. But that's what's in his heart right now, as he's a 10-year-old boy. For me, not so much. But that's where God has given us those unique passions. Next, God has given you a unique pursuit in serving him. This God-given motivation serves as an internal guidance system for our lives. It motivates you to pursue certain activities, subjects, and environments. I desire to do your will, O God. Your law is written in my heart, Psalm 40, verse 8. So hopefully, serving God is the most important thing in your heart, and from that should come all these other pursuits. And God has given us these desires to fulfill his purpose. Many people think, well, if I like to do it, it mustn't be God's will because serving God is boring. That is not true. We find our greatest satisfaction when we pursue what God has purposed for us. When we're fully in God's will, you'll see people who are really passionate about their ministries because they're doing what is God's will for them while it's also in their heart. Next. God has given you a unique purpose in serving him. God has a purpose in giving you your inborn interests. The Bible makes it very clear that your heart was designed by God, but you make the choices to use it for good or evil, for selfish purposes or for his service. You're going to see me repeat this a lot today to try to drill it into your heads. Those who live according to the sinful nature have their mind set on what the nature desires, but those who live in accordance with the Spirit have their mind set on what the Spirit desires. Romans 8:5. So in other words, you may either have selfish ambition in your heart, as James 3:14 says, or you may serve the Lord with all your heart, as 1 Samuel 12:20 says, or you may do the will of God from your heart, Ephesians 6:6. So we're going to talk about this a little bit more later on in the lesson. But again, desires aren't a bad thing. You know, you can love sports, right? And it can help you take good care of your physical body. As a student, you can earn scholarships with them, but they can also become a negative thing and become all-encompassing, so that you're missing church, because you've got games and practices and you don't have time for devotions because everything's all about your sports. The same thing with school. Education's a good thing. Being educated, being able to use an education to get a job, not a problem. But if education becomes all that matters, so that the only thing that matters is studying all the time, and you're skipping out on church, on devotions, on doing ministry because, well, I have to study for school, that's a bad thing. Family is given to us by God, right? They're the ones who support us, care us. If you have children, you're to be pouring into them. If you have family members who aren't a Christian, it's an opportunity to witness. But at the same time, family can become all that matters, so that it takes up all of your time, so that you don't have, oh, well, we have this family event to go here, I can't do this church event because I've got this family thing, I've got this family function, and it can become an all-encompassing thing. So again, the passion is not the bad thing, it's how we use it that can become the bad thing. Next, the recognition of the heart. This is realizing what drives you. You may never have taken time in your life to sort out and identify the things you're good at and motivated and accomplish. As a result, it is unlikely that you've been using these talents as completely or effectively as you could. One key to understanding your heartbeat is to look at your past accomplishments. God gives us motivations, and we're going to look at 15 of them today. God created them to increase our ability to glorify Him. Sin, however, has corrupted our use of them. The basic motivations of your heart is good because God gave them to you, but you can use it in a good way or a bad way. Romans 12:1-2 says, "Therefore I urge you, brothers, in the view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will." So for example, in 1 Timothy 3:1, it says, "If anyone sets his heart on being an overseer, he desires a noble task." If someone desires to be a pastor, that's a good thing, right? But it's okay to want to be a leader. You don't have to be embarrassed by it if you want to be a leader in the church. And if you have the spiritual gift of leadership, that's even better that it lines up with your heart. But the question is, what is the motivation behind you wanting to be a leader or a pastor? Does that come from God or from man? If you want to be a leader because you look at how Jesus led and you're like, I want to be a servant leader, I want to see people grow in Christ, and I want to be able to help guide that process, that's a great thing. If you want to be a pastor because you're like, well, I just don't like the way our church is running things and I think they should be run this way, or you want to be a leader because you just want people to do what you want them to do, those are bad things. So, yeah. So what we're going to do, or what you guys are going to do over the next week, is you're going to take your spiritual EKG. If you have not identified the things you're good at let me try that again. My tongue today is having trouble talking. If you have not identified the things you're good at and motivated to accomplish, you may be dissatisfied with your life. Many become accustomed to living without joy in their lives and without satisfaction. Some of that reason is because as you grow up, you're being guided by others rather than your own heart. Children tend to have these grand dreams about what they want to do when they grow up. But the practicality of life, a lot of times work, bills, family, those stifle them and they become miserable adults. Well-meaning adults often tell children, well, you can't make a career out of that, so you need to stop focusing on it. As a result, it's unlikely that each of you is using all of your talents as completely or effectively as you can. So this week, you have in the back of that lesson, worksheet 1. So we're going to talk a bit about worksheet 1 right now. And this is going to list your accomplishments since childhood. So something to keep in mind is this worksheet is just for you. You're not sharing this with anyone. You're not turning it in. It is strictly for you. It'll be in the back of the lesson. And it's to highlight the things that I did well and enjoyed. So what you're going to do this week is you're going to put your thinking caps on, and you're going to go back in your little time machine of your brain and think about the things that you did, starting at the earliest things that you can remember, accomplishments at home, school, and work, things you enjoyed doing. I'm not asking you if others thought you did them well, but they're things that you enjoyed doing. As I've said, a lot of times well-meaning parents or teachers will stifle your God-given desires. The next thing that you want to do is this step is to focus on the things that made you happy, things that brought you enjoyment. You're going to focus on what you feel are the highlights of the things that you have done. These are things at school, in your marriage, at home, things at work, honors, awards, and how you got them. So what you're going to do, and I'll go into more detail in it in just a minute, but you're going to write out your life history of accomplishments. Recall the things you enjoyed doing and did well. You know, these are the highlights of the things that you have done. So, things that you want to include in your accomplishments. Accomplishments at home or at school, work, whatever. Things you enjoy doing. Again, the key word here is enjoyed. This is not things that you were forced to do or you did well but you had to do and you didn't find any enjoyment in them. These are things you enjoyed doing. Things that you believe you did well. Again, this is about what you believed you did well, not what others told you. And give specific details about what you did and why you enjoyed doing it. And then forget about what other people think about it. So, I know I just went through a lot of things really fast. So, I will pause and let you guys catch up. You're welcome. And while you're doing that, I will talk a little bit about worksheet 1. So, for some of us, this may have been a while ago. For some of you, it may not have been that long ago. Things you did well during your grade school years. So think back to when you were a little kid. For some of you, that may have only been a couple years ago. For others of us, that may have been a while ago. But, you know, things that, like, you know, kids, they like to make plays or collect baseball cards or Pokemon cards, build things with Legos, or if you like a specific game or an activity, you like to read, you like to do crafts, you like to play with bugs, whatever it was that you liked doing in grade school. So think about those things, not things that people like no, don't continue doing that, but you'd be surprised sometimes at things you like doing in grade school and you go back and you're like, I used to really like doing that, why did I ever stop? And then move on to your teenage years. And maybe you got better at some of those activities, those crafts that you liked to do as a little kid, you moved on to the next more difficult art projects. And maybe you went from Legos to building model cars or something like that. Or you got new hobbies. You discovered that you had a certain love for a subject in school. Or you began driving and you're like, hey, I really like this. Or you started cooking or baking, things that you would have done as a teenager. And then the next thing says in college or early 20s. I'm going to say take this all the way up to the end of your 20s because the next step is in your 30s. So apparently when they created this, they didn't think the end of your 20s counted. I still think those are kind of important because you're sort of finding yourself then. So, you know, as you went through college, realizing what you want, the passions that you had, maybe a certain class in college, or you got married and you had kids and you realized, hey, I really like kids. Things like that. Or you continued on with a certain passion you already knew you had. And then the same sort of thing in your 30s, and then complete up to present. And as this says, don't let this sheet limit you. If you realize that you had like 50 things you love to do, get another piece of paper and write them out. Again, this is just for you. This is not being turned in to anybody. Nobody else has to see this but you. So be really honest on it because that'll really help you with the next part of it. So from there, you're going to discover the motivations of your heart, or the motivated affections of your heart. So this is where you're going to take a look at all these things you've written out now and see, is there a common theme in them? And you're going to see if there's a phrase that repeats itself or an activity that repeats itself. See if you can match them to one of the heartbeats that we're going to talk about in just a second. but you've got a worksheet that says worksheet step 2, does not have all this additional writing on it, but yours will say that, and we'll go over these in just a minute. These are going to be the heartbeats that you choose from. And again, remember, these are all God-given motivations. They're only sinful when they're selfishly used. So don't be embarrassed by them. If something doesn't seem spiritual to you, it might just be the way that you're thinking that it should be used. So, what are these motivations? So the first one is, like, these are things that people, it says, I love to, and then the different things. Design and develop. This is something that you like to start, people who they like to start things from scratch, projects or activities, just to create something and go from there. Pioneer, like to try out new concepts. Think about beta testers. That would be a pioneer. Organized, bring order out of chaos. This can be, there should be a list in the back of your lesson that says worksheet for step 2. Organizing can be physically, like you walk into a room, it's a mess, and you're just like, I have to organize everything. I just love to see it all organized. Or it can be like a hierarchy kind of thing. You come into a business and you're like, this could be better organized in terms of that. Serve or help. These are people who, if you enjoy helping others. Acquire and possess. You enjoy getting the highest quality things for the best price. Excel. Attaining high standards. If you see that throughout every step of your life, you've pushed yourself to be the best at what you can be. Influence. Now, this is not how we tend to use influence today, not influencer, because they are not influencers. But anyway, this is people who like to debate, who like to help challenge people to see things in the same way that they see it. Perform. You know, the people who love to be on stage. That kid that put on a play for their parents when they were 5, and then in high school they were in the drama club, and then in college they did plays, things like that. Improve. I like to make things better. You know, if you're always seeing something someone does, and you're like, oh, but if we did this and this, it would be so much better. Maybe that's you. Repair or update. It's like you like to fix things that are broken, or you like to modernize things. Lead and be in charge. If you like to oversee things, if you've always, like as a kid, you were the one who organized all your friends in your play group, and then in high school, you were the president of your class, things like that. Persevere. Persisting at something until it's finished. You never left something half done. You always wanted to see it all the way through. Follow the rules. Operate by policies and procedures. You just love reading SOPs and things like that. Or prevail. You like to fight for what is right. You always are pushing for the little guy. So looking through your list of things, you're going to pick up to 3 of these, and you will put them on your profile. So we're going to go over, there are 4 questions under heart for your profile question. So, the 4 questions are, what do you have the heart for? And what you're going to discover is that most people fall into 3 categories. They either like to work with people, they like to work with things, or they like to work with information. And remember, looking at your whole life, not just what you like to do now or where you're at right now, because again, you may have stifled where your true heart is at because of life. And you might be surprised to see these patterns emerging in your life, and to see that you've limited yourself, and by limiting yourself, you've limited God and how he can use you. The second question is, who do you love to work with? And this can be age or type of person. You can be as specific as you want to here. Age groups. You know, if you just put, I like to work with kids, that can be anything from like a newborn up to 18. That's a huge age group to work with, but you could put, I like to work with pre-K kids, or I like to work with elementary school kids, or junior high, or high school. Do you like to work with men's Bible studies, or women's Bible studies, or men's groups, women's groups, new Christians? I like to work with couples, young adults, the elderly, recovering addicts, wherever it is that you really feel that God has given you a heart for. The third question is, what church issue, ministry, or possible need excites you and concerns you the most? So this can be general or specific. Some examples can be, you know, I really like to help people in their spiritual growth. Or I really love to evangelize and lead people to Christ. I have a heart for prayer. I find myself always in prayer for everything. Or for missions, for justice, for counseling, whatever it is that where you find your heart that area in ministry that you really have a heart for. That's what you'll write in this third area. And the final question is a challenging question. But if you knew you couldn't fail, what would you attempt to do for God with your life? And this is not one to hold back on and limit yourself on. Then we're not going to be like, oh, pastor said he wants to go start a Bible school. We're not going to then hold you to that and be like, well, pastor, it's been, 6 months. Where's your Bible school? No, this is going to be one of those things that's kind of like a challenge for you, and it kind of gives us an idea of maybe an area of ministry that in the future you might really have a passion for. But it's also something that it's kind of like you speaking it to God, not going to like the charismatic, like if you speak it, it's going to happen kind of thing. But a lot of times we limit ourselves even in what we want to do for God, and in doing so, we limit what God does with us. So I will tell you a few times that because I do fill this out every time I do this class, because I find that as I learn more about ministry, that my answers become better. We'll just use that word. But the first time I did this, one of the things I had written down was like, I would love to write a VBS curriculum. I'm like, it's never going to happen. But whatever, that's what I'd love to do if I knew I couldn't fail. And a couple years later, God had me write a VBS curriculum that we used here. And then this past summer, we used it up at Rocky's church. And then the next time I did this, I wrote down that I'd like to write a mentoring curriculum. And again, like, yeah, that's never going to happen. But then we did Romans and we did James, and I wrote those curriculum with Dad. So it's one of those things that, like, don't hold yourself back because you're like, oh, it's never going to happen. It really is one of those things that allows you to open up your mind to the possibilities that God can use you for. Because a lot of times we're the one that's limiting ourselves, not God that's limited. So I want you to really think about what it is that you love to do. The Bible tells us that whatever you do, do it with all your heart as unto the Lord and not as unto men. So the whole thing for this week is for you to think about what you love to do. We're going to take a couple minutes and look at some of the ministries at this church and some other like para-Christian organizations that show how God can use your heart without it being that cookie cutter way that we always think of, like, well, ministry has to look like this. So here, a lot of you guys know that we have Woven Hearts, which Nick's mom, Jelly, started, and it's now run by Barbara. It's knitting, Knitting is not that difficult. Well, depends on who you are. Knitting can be very difficult. If you're me, knitting is impossible. But for some people, knitting is not that difficult. But it's a chance to be an outreach. A lot of the women who come are not Christians. Barbara always has a Bible study with them. She's had women before who've been Christians who their husbands won't let them go to church, but they'll let them come to a knitting club. And then they're able to use this ministry to bless other people. They make the scarves that they give out to the homeless. They make the blankets for the Pregnancy Care Center and a bunch of other things. Security. We're all used to now seeing Enrique standing out there and being security. Well, that was originally started by George. He was a cop who was coming to our church, and he's like, this world is crazy, and it's just getting crazier. You need to have security. Joe Monero, he had started our AV system, and now we have definitely upgraded. Cynthia, with her degree in using the cameras and all of her amazing skills, have taken those skills and the heart that God's given them to be able to make that next step up. Other things to think about. If you like to be outside, we need people to shovel. We need people to garden. We need people to mow the yard. Those are things that you can do. Technology. There are people who just really love technology. Our Facebook page could always use help. The church doesn't have a Twitter account, it could maybe use that, or Instagram, or our web page could use some help. Things like that. If you enjoy reading, you can always looking for people to review curriculums. Do you enjoy baking and cooking? There are fellowships. There's food for the housebound. We all know Vitaly makes amazing food for us for a fundraiser each year. He's using this gift that God has given him to help to bless us here. Driving, you can transport people who wouldn't be able to make it to church otherwise. And then some ministries outside of church. Anybody here like coffee? There is an organization, the Land of 1,000 Hills, and what they do is they work in Rwanda, and using the coffee farmers there, they've helped to bring healing from the war that was there, which was like 20 years ago now, but through coffee. Or fitness. Project AK-47, they use soccer around the world to help keep children out of the armies. There are churches who have softball leagues that help to bring non-Christians in to interact with Christians for the softball leagues. When we were in Trinidad, the church that Cameron goes to down there, they have a fitness class twice a week with a Bible study. Demi, she's going to Peru, where they're, again, going to use soccer as a way to minister. My Fight is an organization that has allowed over the years up-and-coming clothing designers to create clothing that can be sold, or then the profits from that is used to create micro-business loans for people around the world to begin to start businesses to get them out of poverty. Jewelry, Bullets for Beauty, they use bullets and casings from the Ethiopian Civil War. This is a Christian organization that works with women who are HIV positive to be able to find a way to support themselves, but also to give them Christ. Rahab's Bazaar works out of Bangkok, Thailand, and what they do is they go into the red light district there and help to bring those women out of prostitution and give them another opportunity to create funds to send home to their family, which is why most of them have gotten into that line of work by making jewelry or teaching them other skills. So there's so many different ways that God can use your heart's desires. If you're into the medical field, Save the Storks, what they do is they create, they offer sonograms to women who are pregnant, who are considering abortion, and they offer these free sonograms in this very nice medical van. It's not a creepy van, it's a very nice van. IJM, International Justice Missions, these are lawyers. And what they do is they've looked at the fact that there are 4 billion people around this world that live outside the protection of law. You know, most countries have laws against trafficking, that have laws against slave labor. They just don't enforce those laws. IJM goes in and forces them to use the laws that are on the books. And their theory is it's better to prevent someone from being a slave than to rescue them from slavery. So no matter what it is that God has given you a passion for, it can be used for him as long as you think outside the box and let God do the guiding, not you limit him. So that is heart. We're also going to talk about your abilities. And in case you didn't know, not everybody was made from the same mold. When it comes to talents and abilities, God has spread them out. We're all a little different in the gifts and talents that we have. If you're in a ministry and you're realizing it's not working out, how do you know it's not working out? And a lot of times it's because you find it stressful. And it's not necessarily that you're doing anything wrong if you're not getting that enjoyment out of it. It could just be that you're not in that area that God has given you the talents and abilities to work in. Now, sometimes there are external reasons, external sin reasons why you're feeling stressed in a ministry. It could be because, you know, anyone who's done ministry knows that it is hard work. And sometimes if you're not managing your time properly, you can feel stressed because you haven't managed your time properly, not because it's not the right ministry for you. But sometimes if you are in a ministry that isn't in your area of shape, you are going to find it stressful. That's okay. That's why we talk about trial and error. You can't have the error part without error. But today we're going to talk a little bit about abilities now. So Exodus 31:3 says, "And God said to Moses, I have filled him, Bezalel, with the Spirit of God, with skill, ability, and knowledge for all kinds of crafts." So the A in shape does stand for ability, but it also stands for skill and knowledge. It's just A comes first in that list. So that's where ability. So we tend not to think of things as skills or abilities because they come naturally for us. We take them for granted, all these gifts that we have from God. So first we're going to talk about a couple of misconceptions about abilities. Now, let me ask you guys a couple questions. Who has abilities? Everyone. Everyone has abilities. And how do you discover them? Through life experience, through doing things. If you just sit in a little box all the time, you're never going to learn the different things that you can do. So, there's a few myths out there. One, that people aren't born with skills. All skills must be learned. There are a number of skills that are inborn and are developed in early infancy. You have some skills that you're just good at. You look at some sports, like athletes. There are ones that you're just like, how are they able to do that? They just from the time they were little. They're very naturally gifted. You see people who can just pick up an instrument and can play or can just sing any song or can draw anything. Those are just innate talents that they have. Another myth is that the skills needing improvement get it primarily in the classroom. Most of the basic skills we learn are learned at home or somewhere outside of school. In fact, academics can be very limiting on the skill sets that they do teach. We've all known those book smart people who are clueless about everything else. They don't know how to mop a floor or how to go to the grocery store. So there are a lot of areas to learn your skills in. Next, if you have an ability, you will perceive that you have it. You're probably using a number of skills and talents you're not even aware of. Often when an ability comes naturally to someone, it's not until someone else points it out to them that they realize that not everybody can do the same thing that they can do. You assume because it comes easily for you that it comes easy for everyone, and that's not true. A lot of times we just don't see those things in ourselves. And next, the next myth is skills you use at your profession are not for ministry. A lot of times we do this divide in our mind, this is ministry and this is work. And that's not true. A lot of times the heart that God designed you for is unique. A lot of times the job you're in is also unique for a reason. And you just have to be a little creative with it. I always joke that my skills from work don't necessarily translate well, but again, monkeys and kids, they're not that different. So, they have positive reinforcement. It works for everybody. Dad, he has a lot of abilities, as we are all aware, but not all of his are pastoral abilities. Not every pastor does construction. Not every pastor sings. Not every pastor does all the stuff that he does. And it's important to realize that each person has these different abilities. Also, the next myth is that most people have a potential for only a few abilities. The truth is, studies have proven that the average person possesses between 500 to 700 different skills. Did you know you were that skilled? Did you have that many different skills? Have you ever thought about the skills and abilities that are required to feed yourself? You have to be able to first see the food, and then you have to be able to grab the food. Then you have to be able to get the food to your mouth and get it in your mouth. And you might think, well, that's not really a skill. Ask anyone in a nursing home, or someone who's got ALS, or cerebral palsy, or a baby. Those are skills. It's just not things that we tend to think of as skills. But there are ministry opportunity with those basic skills. You're like, well, how is feeding someone a basic skill? Well, people in nursing homes are always looking for people to help feed those who can't feed themselves anymore. Or the nursery, they're looking for people to help feed babies. If you're able to read, you can read to the blind. You can read to those who are no longer able to read for themselves. You can help someone who's disabled go out for a walk. Doing your hair and nails, you don't always think about that, but in nursing homes, they love having people come in, and the ladies love having their hair done, their nails painted, those things that help them to make them feel more like who they used to be. These are basic skills that can be used to honor and glorify God. Even driving, you can take someone to a doctor's appointment, you can pick them up from a doctor's appointment. All those things are abilities that you have that you might just take for granted. So how do you discover your skills? So, you have, this week, you will write down all these different things that you can do. And as you look through this list, you're gonna build off of this now for your abilities. So this is a very important step to do this week. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna look for verbs that kind of repeat themselves. And now you will have, this is important because this is the one area that people tend to get confused the most on when they're filling out their shape profile. You have one list for your heart and one list for your abilities. Don't confuse the lists. And this is also why I tell you to do that as you're going along, so that if you have questions, you can contact me this week, or next Sunday you can ask me, not 3 weeks from now when you're trying to fill this out and you're like, I don't remember what I'm supposed to do, so I'm just gonna make stuff up. Please don't do that. Anyway, what you're gonna do is you're gonna look through these abilities and see which of these kind of are something that you think that you can do. And you'll pick up to 3 of them. And then you're gonna go to your to the profile. So first, fill out your heart section, and then flip the page, and you can go to your ability section. And there are 5 questions there. The first one may not apply to you, my current vocation. If you don't have a current vocation, You can just ignore that question. The second one is other jobs or skills I have experience in. So here you get to write out your job history if you've had one. Again, if it doesn't apply to you, don't worry about it. And then the third one is, I feel I have these specialized abilities. These are the three, like you'll pick up to 3 from worksheet number 3, so 3 from 3. And then I have taught a class or seminar on. Again, this may not apply to you. So for some of you, this may be a very easy section. You just have to fill out question 3, and then number 5. This is one that is a thinking question. This is a deep thinking question. You may have to talk to other people. But I feel my most valuable personal asset is. Yeah, have fun with that one. Think about that one. Don't just slough it off and be like, whatever my most valuable personal asset is, I'm me. But actually put something of value there. So that is heart and abilities. Are there any questions? Because I know I've just thrown a whole lot of information at you guys in a very short period of time. Yes. Yes, that's all. Just write out your life history and then fill out the 2 sections. That is true. Your life history is a little shorter than maybe some other people's, except for maybe Mikey. His might be a little shorter than yours. Yes. Sure. Or you can contact me. But yeah, and do you want me to go over it again? Because I know it was a lot of stuff, and as you work on it, but the biggest thing is really being honest with yourself, with who you've been in the past and who you are now, and looking at the different ways that God has gifted you. Because a lot of times we do tend to kind of push down the things that we love to do and our different skill sets, and kind of just focus on what we have to do now. And in the course of doing that, we miss opportunities that God gives us to do things for him. Were you got, yes?
Under abilities,
Mm-hmm.
question 1, you say my current location. How would you distinguish or explain location as opposed to job? How would you explain
That is, your vocation is your job. It's just a fancy way of saying job. Yeah. Yeah.
But vocation also, like, it can be student.
Right.
So it doesn't have to be a paid job, housewife, whatever. Where are you spending your time in your resources?
Okay. So yeah, so vocation can be, thank you for that clarification. Your job, your whatever you're doing right now in your life. You're retired, yeah. All right, any other questions? How did everybody do with their spiritual gift tests? Were you guys able to take those and kind of get some guidance as to where you're going with that? All right. Yes.
Do they know that they're going to be meeting?
Yes, I've gone over that they'll be meeting with us. Yeah.
You have to have all that stuff done.
Well, yes, when you turn your thing in, again, this is why I say please do this correctly, because what happens is people turn it in and then we end up spending the entire meeting redoing the whole shape profile because it was not done correctly the first time. So if you want to have a very productive short meeting, do it correctly the first time. Well, you completely, do you see these lists? Throw them out and just make up whatever you want. Or use one list for both of them. I'm trying to think of, just completely don't fill out that part. Let's see, what are some other creative things that people have done? Yeah, people have done some pretty creative things. But again, it's when you wait until after the class is over, and it's a month later, I'm like, hey, are you gonna turn in your shape profile? And you're like, oh yeah, and then you sit down to do it, and you don't remember anything that I said in class, because we all have very short-term memories. And you're trying to do it without remembering what you were supposed to be doing. That's how you fill it out wrong. It is possible. Way more possible than you would think. Sometimes I'm impressed. I'm like, that's an ability to do things completely opposite. All right. Any other questions? Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. There should be just one that is spiritual gifts. Th- Yes, yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, so that is a possibility. Like mom is, her spiritual gift is shepherding. It is not dad's spiritual gift. So, yeah. There was a typo on that one. Yes, there, I had an S where there shouldn't be an S. Yeah. Yeah. Right. I think that you might have had a typo in yours, because there was one that, so all these different organizations have taken like the same name, and some of them have like spiritual gift, and some say spiritual gifts. And I think that was one of the ones that if you typed in like gift instead of gifts, or the other way around, you would go to a different webpage, because I think I ran into that, and I was like, wait, what is this? And then yeah. So that's where, yeah, they've all named this like almost exactly the same like web pages. It's just a little different. So the three that I put were the ones that are the better ones, except for that I did have a typo on the red letter one. Yeah. All right. Anything else? All right, then we will close in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for this day. I thank you for each one who you've brought out. I thank you for the unique heartbeat that you've given them, and the heart that they have for serving you, and for each of the different abilities and talents that you've given each person, and how you've used those to mold us and shape us to be a unique servant of you, to be able to minister to people in a way that reaches them, that may not be the way that we traditionally think of reaching them, but it's a way that you can use. Help us not to put ourselves or you in a box, but to really be open to how you want to use us, and how you can use us, and how you desire to see us serve you in ministry. And just thank you for each one here and the work that they're doing, and as they think through their lives, help them to see the things that you want them to see, and guide and direct them in that. In Jesus' name, amen.